The afternoon sun was fading behind the tall buildings, leaving soft golden light over the town square. The place was always busy, children chasing pigeons, vendors shouting, and people rushing home after work. In one corner of that noisy square sat a young man with a guitar resting across his knees. He wore a plain shirt, a calm face, and dark glasses that hid his eyes. His fingers gently touched the strings as if he was feeling them, not just playing them. Every day he came to that same spot. He didn't call out to people or ask for money. He just sat there listening. The sound of shoes on the pavement, the laughter of strangers, the bus brakes screeching. These were the sounds that painted his world. For him, sound wasn't just background noise. It was color, movement, and life. Most people didn't know his story. To many, he was just another street musician trying to survive. Some people dropped coins in the open guitar case out of habit. A few slowed down to listen, maybe for a few seconds before walking away. But every note he played came from a place deeper than anyone could guess. He couldn't see the world around him. He had lost his sight years ago. But music gave him a way to feel it again. He had been blind since he was 9. It wasn't an accident or a tragedy that came suddenly. It happened slowly, like the sunset that fades a little every minute until one day the world turns dark. A small medical problem had taken his vision, and though doctors tried, they couldn't bring it back. He remembered the last thing he ever saw, his father fixing an old guitar by the window. The strings were broken, the body was cracked, but his father's hands moved carefully, lovingly, as if that guitar was a living thing. After losing his sight, life changed completely. The world he once saw in bright colors turned into shadows and sounds. At first he hated it. He stayed quiet most days, listening to the sound of the clock ticking, the wind outside, and sometimes his father's soft voice humming. But that humming turned into something more. His father began to play the repaired guitar each evening, sitting close to him. The music spoke where words couldn't. It told stories, it gave comfort, and slowly it gave him hope. One day, when his father's hands were too tired to play, the boy reached for the guitar. He ran his fingers over the wooden surface, over the strings, over the scratches that told their own history. "You don't need to see it," his father said quietly. "You just need to feel it." Those words stayed with him. He started learning to play by listening. No lessons, no written notes, just sound and memory. He could tell when the string was tuned wrong by the slight change in vibration. He could feel the difference between a sad chord and a happy one. His world became a symphony of textures and tones. When his father passed away a few years later, that guitar became his closest companion. Now, years later, that same guitar rested across his knees in the town square. It was scratched, worn, and slightly cracked, but he refused to replace it. It held the warmth of every memory, every struggle, and every small victory. He often arrived early, just as the shops opened. He liked the sound of the world waking up. The first footsteps, the newspaper boy's whistle, the hum of engines. He would sit quietly for a while, his fingers tracing the edges of the instrument before starting to play. He didn't plan what he would play. The music came as it wanted, shaped by how he felt that day. Sometimes it was gentle and hopeful. Other times it carried a hint of sadness, like distant rain. Most people didn't stop to notice. They were busy living their own stories, checking phones, carrying shopping bags, chasing buses. But once in a while, someone would pause, turn their head, and listen. For a brief moment, the city's noise seemed to fade around the sound of his guitar. Those moments meant everything to him. He didn't play for fame. He didn't play for money either. He played because music was the one thing that made him feel free. When he played, he wasn't blind. He wasn't poor. He wasn't alone. He was just whole. Sometimes he could sense the mood of people passing by, not by sight but by sound. The hurried click of heels meant someone late for work. The slow dragging steps meant someone tired or sad. And when children ran past laughing, he smiled to himself, because it reminded him that joy still lived in the world. One chilly evening, as he was playing a soft tune, he heard a voice near him, a gentle, curious one. "That's beautiful," the voice said. It was a man, maybe in his 40s. "Did you write that yourself?" The guitarist paused, smiled slightly, and nodded. "I just play what I feel," he replied softly. The man stayed a while, listening in silence. When the song ended, he dropped a few coins into the guitar case but didn't walk away immediately. "You have a gift," he said quietly. "You should play somewhere people can really hear you, not just on this corner." The blind guitarist only smiled again. "People hear me here," he said. "They just don't know it yet." The man chuckled and left, but his words stayed in the guitarist's mind. Play somewhere people can really hear you. The next few days were normal. Crowds, noise, cold mornings. But something inside him felt different. The idea of playing in front of a real audience made his heart beat faster. Not from fear exactly, but from something close to hope. He wondered if his music could really reach more people, if they could feel what he felt without needing to see him. A few days later, the same man came back. This time he had a small card in his hand. "There's a local event next weekend," he said. "A music night for the community. I'm helping organize it. I want you to play." The guitarist froze. The thought of standing on a stage surrounded by strangers made him nervous. He had never performed anywhere except this street. Here he felt safe. The city noises were familiar. The rhythm of footsteps was like a heartbeat. On a stage it would be different. Quiet, expectant, full of eyes he couldn't see. "I don't know," he said slowly. "I've never done something like that." The man smiled. "Then maybe it's time. People need to hear you. Trust me, they won't forget it." He held the card tightly for a long moment. It felt like a small piece of destiny in his hand. That night, back in his small apartment, he sat on the edge of his bed, thinking. The place was simple. A single lamp, a chair, a few old records stacked on a table. The walls were plain, but they were filled with the soft echo of past melodies. He picked up his guitar and began to play, not for the crowd, not for the future, just for himself. As he played, memories returned, his father's laughter. The first time he strummed a chord without mistake, the comfort music gave him when he was lonely. The melody turned slow and thoughtful, filled with gratitude and longing. By the time the last note faded, he knew his answer. He would play, not to impress anyone, but to honor the sound that had been his light all these years. The next morning he returned to the square. The same people passed, the same noise surrounded him, but inside he felt something new, a quiet excitement. The world hadn't changed, but his heart had. For the first time, he wasn't just waiting for people to hear him. He was ready to be truly heard. He tilted his face toward the morning sun, feeling its warmth spread across his skin. Then he began to play again, the same gentle tune that had once filled his home when his father was still alive. The notes rose softly above the traffic, above the crowd, carrying a promise that something was about to begin. And though he couldn't see it, people were already stopping when one by one went to listen. The week passed faster than he expected. The invitation to the local music night stayed in his pocket for days before he dared to touch it again. The thin paper felt heavier than it should have, like a responsibility waiting for him to say yes. Every evening he thought about it, the lights, the stage, the sound of people waiting for him to play. He imagined it all, even though he couldn't see any of it. Each time he sat in the square with his guitar, he tried to picture what it would be like to play for more than strangers passing by. He tried to imagine people sitting quietly, listening, not just hearing notes, but feeling them. The thought scared him as much as it excited him. For most of his life, he had learned to live quietly. He didn't ask for attention. He didn't chase recognition. Music was enough. It gave him peace, purpose, and a voice that didn't need words. But deep inside, a small voice kept whispering that maybe, just maybe, it was time to share it with the world beyond the street corner. One afternoon, as the wind brushed softly against his face, he heard familiar footsteps approaching. The man who had given him the invitation was back. "So," the man said kindly, "have you thought about it?" The guitarist nodded slowly. "I've thought about nothing else," he admitted with a small smile. "And?" He took a deep breath. "I'll do it." The man's tone warmed. "Good, you won't regret it. It's next Friday evening. I'll come and help you set up. You'll have a microphone, a stool, and everything you need." He thanked him, and after the man left, he sat for a long time in silence. His hands trembled slightly as they rested on the guitar strings. He wasn't used to people helping him. For so long, he had learned to manage everything on his own. But this time it felt different. It wasn't pity, and it was respect. That night back home, he began to prepare. His apartment was small, quiet, and smelled faintly of old wood and rain from the open window. He placed the guitar on his lap and began to tune it by ear. Each pluck of the string sent a vibration through his fingertips like the pulse of something alive. He didn't have sheet music or a written plan. He never needed one. His fingers knew the way on their own. The question now was, what would he play? He had hundreds of melodies inside him, each tied to a memory. But for this event, he wanted something special, something that carried his whole story without a single word. He thought of his father again, the man who taught him how to feel music instead of just playing it. He remembered those evenings by the window, when his father would hum softly while fixing the guitar. That tune, simple but full of love, had always stayed with him. It was the first melody he ever learned, and the one that brought him comfort through every dark day. That was the one. He would play his father's song. He spent the following days practicing, not to perfect it, but to connect with it again. Every note reminded him of the warmth of his father's voice, the gentle tap of his foot, the sound of the wind outside their old house. Sometimes he smiled while playing. Other times his eyes filled with quiet tears that he quickly brushed away. Neighbors in the building began to notice. The walls were thin and music carried easily. People who usually hurried past his door now stopped to listen for a few moments. An old woman who lived down the hall would sometimes leave small treats outside his door, warm bread, tea, fruit, without saying a word. By the time Friday came, he was ready. Or as ready as he could be. He woke up early feeling both nervous and excited. He wore his best shirt, the one with the smooth buttons that always made him think of special occasions. He packed his guitar carefully into its case, touching it one last time before closing it. When the man arrived to pick him up, the air outside was cool and smelled faintly of rain. The sound of the city felt different that day, like it was holding its breath for him. The drive to the event was quiet. The man didn't speak much, sensing the performer needed silence more than small talk. When they arrived, he could feel the change in atmosphere immediately. The sound of voices echoed in the large hall. There was movement everywhere, people setting up chairs, adjusting microphones, testing speakers. He could hear laughter, footsteps on the wooden floor, and the soft buzz of excitement that always comes before something special. He stayed still for a moment, gripping his guitar case. "You okay?" the man asked gently. "Yes," he said after a pause. "Just listening." The man guided him to the stage. The wooden boards creaked slightly under his shoes. He ran his fingers along the edge of the stool they placed for him. The microphone stood in front of him, its metal surface cool to the touch. Everything felt foreign and familiar at the same time. As the event began, he waited backstage. He could hear the other performers, a young singer with a bright voice, a small band playing upbeat tunes. The crowd clapped after every act, their laughter and cheers filling the room. He tried not to imagine their faces, but their energy was enough. When the host finally announced his turn, he heard a hush fall over the hall. "Please welcome our next performer," the voice said. "He may not see the world the way we do, but tonight, you'll see the world through his music." His heart pounded as the man led him to the center of the stage. The warmth of the lights touched his skin. He could feel hundreds of eyes watching, though he couldn't see any of them. For a moment he froze, gripping the guitar too tightly. His throat felt dry. Then in the silence, he remembered his father's voice. "You don't need to see it. You just need to feel it." He took a deep breath and began to play. The first chord filled the air softly, uncertainly at first. The room went still. He felt the tension in his shoulders melt as the notes began to flow naturally. His fingers moved gently over the strings, and with every vibration the fear faded a little more. The melody started quiet and slow, then grew fuller, deeper. Each note carried a piece of him, his childhood, his loss, his love for sound. It wasn't just a song anymore. It was a memory turned into music. People in the audience stopped breathing for a second. They could feel the emotion even before they could name it. It was as if the guitar spoke directly to the heart. Some closed their eyes, some leaned forward, and some simply watched in quiet awe. As he played, he forgot where he was. The lights, the people, the stage, and all disappeared. It was just him and the guitar again, like the evenings by the window years ago. His fingers moved with confidence and care, every motion deliberate, every note alive. When the final chord rang out, the sound lingered in the air for a few seconds before fading into silence. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then came the applause, soft at first, then louder, stronger, like a wave breaking. He could feel it more than hear it. The vibration of clapping hands, the sound of people standing up, cheering. It hit him like warmth spreading through his chest. He smiled faintly, bowing his head slightly, unsure how to react to such a powerful moment. For someone who had spent most of his life unnoticed, it was overwhelming. Backstage, the organizer met him with genuine admiration. "You were amazing," he said. "They loved you." The blind guitarist simply nodded, his smile quiet but full of gratitude. "I just played what I felt," he whispered. On the way home that night, the city sounded different again. The noise was softer somehow, like the whole world had turned into a melody. He leaned his head against the car window, listening to the hum of the road, the distant echo of applause still ringing in his mind. For the first time, he realized something. People hadn't just heard his music. They had felt it, and that made all the difference. When he got home, he placed his guitar gently by the window. He didn't play anything else that night. He didn't need to. He just sat there quietly, listening to the rain tapping softly on the glass. The sound felt like a new beginning, and though he couldn't see it, somewhere deep inside, he knew his world had just changed forever. The morning after the performance felt unreal. He woke up early, half expecting that everything from the night before had just been a dream. But when he reached over and touched his guitar, he could still feel the faint warmth on its strings, as if it remembered the music too. The apartment was quiet except for the distant hum of the city outside. Usually mornings felt heavy, the start of another day like all the rest. But today felt lighter. Something had changed. He poured himself a cup of tea, sat by the window, and listened to the sounds that drifted in through the open frame. Car engines, birds, a vendor shouting somewhere down the street. But between those familiar noises, he could still hear the faint echo of applause in his mind. It was strange and beautiful, and it made his chest tighten in a good way. By noon, there was a knock at his door. He wasn't expecting anyone, but when he opened it, he recognized the voice immediately. It was the man who had invited him to the event. "Good morning," the man said cheerfully. "I hope I didn't wake you." "No, not at all," the guitarist replied, smiling. "Come in." The man stepped inside, carrying something that rustled softly. "Newspapers. You made the front page of the community section," he said, placing them on the table. "People can't stop talking about your performance last night." The guitarist blinked behind his dark glasses. "I did?" "You did?" the man said with a laugh. "Someone filmed your song and shared it online. It's spreading fast. People are calling you the blind guitarist with a golden touch." The words sounded strange to him. He wasn't used to attention. "I didn't think anyone would notice me that way," he said softly. "They noticed," the man said kindly. "And they'll remember too." He left soon after, but his words stayed echoing in the small apartment. The guitarist ran his fingers over the folded newspaper. He couldn't read the printed words, but he could imagine them. His story, his music, his moment on stage. It felt surreal. Over the next few days, his life began to change in quiet, unexpected ways. People who used to walk past him in the square now stopped to greet him. Some called out compliments, others asked for his next performance. Children clapped when they saw him set up his guitar. Shopkeepers smiled and offered him water or tea. He wasn't invisible anymore. Still, he stayed humble. Every morning he returned to his favorite corner, the same spot where his journey had begun. The air there felt like home. The ground beneath his feet had recorded every note he'd ever played. And though the crowd around him had grown, he played with the same gentle heart as before. But one afternoon, as he was finishing a song, a voice called out from the edge of the crowd. It was a woman, her tone confident but kind. "Excuse me," she said. "Are you the guitarist who played at the cultural night?" He nodded slightly, smiling. "Yes, I am." "I knew it," she said. "I was there. You were incredible. I teach at the music academy downtown, and our director would love to meet you. Would you be interested in performing at our upcoming charity concert?" He hesitated. The word academy sounded big, maybe too big. "I'm not trained," he said quietly. "I just play by ear." "That's exactly why we want you," she said warmly. "You have something most people spend years trying to learn. Real feeling. Please think about it." She handed him a card and walked away before he could answer. He held the small card tightly, just like he had held the first invitation. Once again, a door had opened where he hadn't even been knocking. That night he couldn't sleep. He lay awake, listening to the soft rain outside, his thoughts tangled between excitement and fear. Could he do it again? Could he stand on a stage bigger this time and play for people who expected perfection? He wasn't sure. But another thought whispered back. Maybe perfection wasn't what people wanted. Maybe they just wanted honesty. The next morning, he made his choice. He called the number on the card and agreed to play. The following week passed in a blur of preparation. The concert was scheduled in the city's large theater, a place known for professional musicians, orchestras, and grand performances. The idea of stepping onto that stage made his hands tremble. He spent hours each day practicing, not because he wanted to impress anyone, but because he wanted to give his best. The sound of the guitar filled his apartment like light filling a dark room. Sometimes he stopped mid-song and smiled quietly to himself, remembering how far he had come. When the day finally arrived, the city buzzed with energy. Posters for the concert hung across streets and cafes. Though he couldn't see them, people described them to him, his picture, his name in bold letters, and the words, "An evening of music and hope." At the theater, he could feel the difference the moment he stepped inside. The air was cool. The sound of voices echoed from high ceilings, and the faint scent of polished wood filled the space. Technicians moved around checking microphones and cables. Musicians tuned their instruments, their notes bouncing softly off the walls. A woman from the academy greeted him warmly. "Everyone's been waiting to meet you," she said. "You'll perform in the second half. The hall will be full tonight." He smiled, though his heart raced. "I'll be ready." As he waited backstage, he listened to the sounds of the first few acts. Violins, piano, soft singing, each performance beautiful in its own way. But he could feel something in the air, a quiet anticipation. People were waiting for him, even if they didn't know exactly why. When his turn came, someone gently guided him toward the stage. He could hear the rustle of the audience, the sound of hundreds of people settling into silence. He felt the warmth of the stage lights touch his face. He sat down on the stool, holding his old guitar, the same one his father had repaired all those years ago. Its surface was smooth and familiar under his fingertips. For a moment, he did nothing, just breathed, listened. The quiet stretched across the hall like a thread. Then softly he began to play. The first note was like a whisper, delicate and pure. It hung in the air, and then another followed and another, each building gently on the last. The sound filled the vast room, reaching even the farthest seats. As the song grew, so did the emotion behind it. His fingers danced across the strings, confident and free. Every movement told a story of loss, of struggle, of love, of peace. He didn't need words. The music said everything. People watched, completely still. Some had tears in their eyes without understanding why. Others closed theirs, letting the melody carry them somewhere quiet and beautiful. By the time he reached the final verse, the entire hall was silent. Not a single cough, not a whisper, only his guitar speaking softly to everyone there. When the last note faded, there was a long pause. Then, as if waking from a spell, the audience erupted in applause. The sound was powerful, endless. People stood up, clapping, cheering. Some shouted his name. He could feel it, not through sight, but through sound and air and heart. His body trembled, his hands shaking slightly as he lowered the guitar. Someone came onto the stage, took his hand, and raised it gently. "Ladies and gentlemen," the voice said, "let's hear it for the guitarist who reminded us all what real music feels like." The crowd roared louder. Backstage afterward, people surrounded him with admiration. Musicians shook his hand, students asked questions, and even teachers admitted they'd never heard anything quite like it. Through it all, he stayed humble, smiling softly, saying only, "I just play what I feel." When the night ended and the hall grew quiet again, he sat alone for a while holding his guitar. He could still hear the applause echoing in the air. But more than that, he could feel peace. He didn't need to see the world to know he had touched it. On the way home, he thought about his father again, how proud he would have been, how he always believed in him even when the world didn't. As the car moved through the quiet streets, he leaned back, letting the rhythm of the road blend with the melody still playing softly in his mind. He had once been the boy who played alone on a street corner, unseen and unheard. Now he had become the sound people would never forget, and deep inside he knew this was only the beginning. The next morning, the sound of applause still echoed in his head like a dream that refused to fade. He woke up with the same quiet smile he had fallen asleep with. The sunlight slipped gently through the curtains, brushing across his face as if to greet him. The air felt lighter, fresher, filled with something he hadn't felt in years. Peace. He sat up slowly, reaching for his guitar beside the bed. His fingertips ran over its familiar surface, tracing every dent, every scratch. Each one told a story in his story. He didn't play right away. He just held it, listening to the silence of the room. For once, silence didn't feel lonely. It felt full, like it was holding its breath for him. Later that day, when he went out, the city seemed different. The footsteps on the street sounded the same, but people's voices carried new warmth. Some called out greetings as he passed. A few even stopped him, saying they had seen the concert video online. One young man said, "Your song made my mother cry." In a good way. She said it felt like the guitar was speaking to her. He smiled shyly, unsure what to say. Compliments still felt strange to him. For so long, no one had paid attention. Now everyone seemed to notice. By the afternoon, he returned to his usual spot in the square, the same corner where everything had begun. When he sat down and opened his guitar case, he could already hear whispers. People recognized him now. They weren't just walking past, and they were waiting for him to play. He tuned his guitar slowly, listening carefully to each note. When he began to play, the crowd fell silent. The sound of his guitar spread through the air like sunlight on water. It wasn't just a performance, it was a conversation. Every note spoke to someone, every pause carried emotion. A little girl sitting with her mother whispered, "He sounds like he's telling a story." And he was. Only his story didn't need words. When the song ended, the square erupted in applause. Someone shouted, "Play another." He smiled, nodded, and played again. This time something softer. A melody he had never shared before. He didn't know that someone in the crowd was recording it on their phone. That evening, the video went online. Within hours, it began to spread. By the next morning, thousands of people had seen it. By the end of the week, hundreds of thousands. Comments flooded in from around the world. People from countries he had never even heard of. Writing messages full of love and admiration. "This touched my soul. I can feel his music even without seeing him." True art has no limits. He had never used a computer, but a neighbor described it to him. "You've gone viral," she said, laughing. "People everywhere are talking about you." The idea made him smile, though he didn't completely understand it. He wasn't trying to be famous. He just wanted to play. But now his music had traveled farther than he ever could. In the days that followed, journalists started visiting the square. They asked questions, took pictures, recorded short interviews. He always answered politely, but never with big words or long speeches. When one reporter asked what success meant to him, he said simply, "It means someone felt something when I played." His humility made people love him even more. There was something pure about the way he spoke, the way he smiled. He didn't act like a star. He still played in the same corner, wore the same simple clothes, and carried the same old guitar. But things around him began to change. A local radio station played clips of his music. A producer invited him to record a few songs. Even a television program wanted him as a guest. The world was opening doors he had never imagined existed. Still, he didn't let the attention distract him. Every morning, before anything else, he sat quietly with his guitar. He called it listening time. He didn't play during those moments, and he just listened to the world. The sound of the wind, the distant hum of the city, the rhythm of footsteps. These were the things that helped him stay grounded. One afternoon, he was invited to perform at a large charity concert in the capital. The event would raise funds for children with disabilities. The organizers told him that many people were coming, including musicians, actors, and government officials. He hesitated at first. The idea of performing in front of such an audience made him nervous. But when he heard that the cause would help children who struggled just like he once did, he agreed without a second thought. On the day of the event, the theater was filled to the last seat. Backstage, he could hear the murmur of voices, the soft buzz of excitement. Volunteers moved around, checking equipment and organizing schedules. He sat quietly in a corner, holding his guitar close, breathing slowly. When it was finally his turn, the host introduced him warmly. "Please welcome a man whose music reminds us that vision isn't only with the eyes. Sometimes it comes from the heart." He walked carefully onto the stage, guided by a staff member. The applause started before he even played a single note. He sat down, adjusted the microphone, and took a deep breath. The air felt heavy with anticipation. Then softly he began to play. The first chord shimmered through the hall, gentle and warm. The sound grew, building layer by layer until the room was filled with emotion. Every note was like a heartbeat, honest, steady, alive. The crowd went silent. Even the photographers stopped clicking. It was as if time itself had slowed down to listen. As he played, memories surfaced. His father's humming, the quiet evenings alone, the first time someone had told him he had a gift. Each memory became part of the music, flowing through his hands into the strings. When the final note faded, the silence that followed was deep and heavy, like everyone was holding their breath. Then the applause began, a roar that shook the room. People stood cheering, clapping, some even wiping tears. He couldn't see them, but he could feel them. The air itself seemed to vibrate with gratitude. Later, backstage, people surrounded him again. A few musicians hugged him, thanking him for reminding them why they started playing in the first place. A famous singer told him, "You didn't just perform, you moved souls." He smiled softly and said, "Music did that, not me." The concert was broadcast on television that night. Millions watched it. The next morning, his name was everywhere, on radio, social media, and in newspapers across the country. People described him as the blind guitarist who played from the heart, but he didn't let it change who he was. The next day, he was back in his same corner, playing like always. Crowds gathered again, bigger than before, but his calm stayed the same. He greeted everyone with a gentle nod and kept playing, lost in the sound. One afternoon, a child approached him after a song. The boy hesitated before speaking, his voice shy but full of wonder. "I can't see very well," he said quietly. "But when I heard you play, I felt like I could see everything." The guitarist bent down slightly, smiling. "That's the best kind of seeing," he said. "With your heart." The boy grinned, and his mother whispered a thank you through her tears. Moments like that meant more to him than any fame or money. He understood now that music wasn't just sound. It was connection. It was a bridge between hearts, a language beyond sight or words. As the sun began to set that evening, he played one last song. The melody rose gently above the noise of the city, carrying warmth, hope, and peace. People walking by slowed down, listening, smiling. Some recorded, some stood quietly, and some just closed their eyes to feel it. He didn't know how long he would play in that square or where life would take him next. But one thing was certain, he had found his purpose. And that purpose wasn't fame, wasn't money, wasn't recognition. It was something much simpler, to remind people of what it means to feel. The world had finally heard him. But more importantly, they had listened, and as the last light of day faded into night, the blind guitarist kept playing, his heart leading where his eyes could not, filling the city with the sound of a soul that refused to be unseen. The weeks after the charity concert were unlike anything he had experienced before. Everywhere he went, people recognized him by his voice or the way he carried his guitar. Some asked for photos, others just wanted to shake his hand or say thank you. But through it all, he stayed the same. Every morning, he woke up early, brewed tea, and sat by the window, listening to the sounds of the city waking up. To him, the world wasn't made of things to see. It was made of sounds that painted pictures in his mind. The rustle of trees, the hum of cars, the distant laughter of children. All of it was his kind of sunrise. He still walked to the square every day. That small corner had become more than a spot to play. It was part of him. The people there were his audience, his family, his reminder that no matter how far his music reached, its roots began right there. One morning, he arrived earlier than usual. The air was cool, the streets still quiet. He sat down, ran his hand across his guitar, and smiled. The world felt peaceful. When he began to play, the sound floated gently, soft and calm like the day itself. After a few songs, he heard a familiar voice, an old man who often came by to listen. "You're becoming a legend, my friend," the man said with a laugh. He chuckled softly. "Legends are stories. I'm just a man with a guitar." The old man nodded. "Maybe, but your story is giving people hope." Those words stayed with him. That night, as he sat in his small room, he thought about what the man had said. Hope. That was something he had once struggled to hold on to. He remembered the long nights when he wondered if his life had any meaning, if he would ever be more than just a man playing music no one heard. Now, people were listening. And not just with their ears, with their hearts. A few weeks later, he received an invitation to visit a music school for children with disabilities. The teachers wanted him to perform and speak to the students. He hesitated at first. He wasn't used to giving speeches, but then he thought about the kids. He thought about how much he would have wanted someone to tell him years ago that blindness didn't mean the end of dreams. So he agreed. When he arrived at the school, he could hear the chatter of excited children. Their laughter echoed through the hallways, bright and full of life. Someone guided him into a classroom, where the children sat eagerly waiting, some with walking canes, others in wheelchairs, but all with wide, curious hearts. He greeted them gently and sat down with his guitar. "I'm not here to teach," he said with a small smile. "I'm here to share what music gave me, freedom." He played softly at first, a gentle melody that filled the room like sunlight. The children sat in silence, listening closely. Some swayed with the rhythm, others smiled without realizing it. When he finished, a young boy raised his hand. "Did you ever feel scared to play in front of people?" He nodded. "Yes, many times. I used to think people wouldn't understand me. But then I realized something. You don't have to see someone to reach them. You just have to play with your heart." Another child asked, "How do you play so well when you can't see the guitar?" He smiled. "Because I can feel it. Every string, every sound, I know them like I know my heartbeat. You don't need eyes to see beauty. You just need to feel it." The room fell quiet again. Some of the teachers wiped their eyes. The children clapped softly. But what touched him most was the silence between the claps. The kind of silence that meant they truly understood. After that visit, the school sent him a letter. They said his performance had inspired many students to start learning music. One line in the letter stood out. "You help them believe they can create beauty, no matter their limits." That simple sentence became something he carried in his heart every day. Months passed, and his music continued to reach more people. A record company offered to help him release his first album, a collection of the songs he had played on the streets. They said they wanted to keep the recordings raw and honest, just the way he played them. He agreed, but he asked for one thing. That part of the earnings go towards supporting music programs for children with disabilities. When the album came out, it was called The Way I Hear the World. It was a simple title, but it captured everything he believed in. People everywhere loved it, not just for the music, but for the emotion behind it. Each track felt like a window into his soul. As the months went by, he was invited to perform in other cities, even in other countries. Each place had its own sound, its own rhythm. He loved listening to the new textures of life, different languages, different instruments, different hearts. But no matter how far he went, he always returned home to the same square. The people there never stopped waiting for him. When they heard the familiar strum of his guitar, they smiled and gathered around like old friends. One evening, after finishing a long day of playing, a woman approached him. Her voice trembled as she spoke. "My husband passed away last year," she said softly. "I stopped listening to music because it hurt too much. But your song made me remember how it felt to love again." "Thank you." He didn't know what to say. He simply held her hand for a moment and nodded. Sometimes words weren't needed. Music spoke where language failed. As time went on, his story became a symbol of something bigger, of resilience, of beauty and imperfection, of the human spirit that refuses to give up. People wrote articles, made short films, and told his story online. But to him, it wasn't a story about fame or success. It was about connection, the quiet kind that happens between one heart and another. Years later, he still played in the same square, though the crowds had grown even larger. Children who once watched him play now brought their own instruments. They sat beside him, learning, laughing, creating. The square had become a small community of music and kindness. One day, a little girl asked, "Do you ever wish you could see?" He paused for a moment, smiling thoughtfully. "Sometimes," he said softly. "But if I could see, I might have missed learning how to listen. And listening has given me more than sight ever could." The girl nodded, even if she didn't fully understand yet. She would one day. That night, as the city lights flickered and people slowly drifted home, he stayed behind for a while. He played one last song, a slow, gentle tune that spoke of everything he had lived. The air was cool, and the world was quiet except for his guitar.